My name is Tim Ryan. I'm a network manager and operations manager here at City College. And Bill?
My name is Bill Doherty. I teach in the computer technologies department at Truckee Meadows Community College in Reno, Nevada.
So we also, another member of our team here isn't here at the moment, Anton Belong. He's a product or account manager with Palo Alto Networks. So as you go through this, you'll see a lot of information about Palo Alto. It's one of the systems that we use here at City College. They also have Palo Alto Networks Academy now that they recently formed. So we'll be able to pass on or forward information with regards to that. So this is the rough outline. Bill and I are both going to take about 20 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes at the end and go through. So there've been a lot of security breaches, so everybody is obviously familiar with things that are going on out in the industry. And you know, it seems to just get worse and worse as the year 2014 went on, and a lot of different complexity to it. So this is just one attempt at kind of gathering some statistics, and I think the numbers here, you know, are potentially a little bit low, but it certainly is on the minds of everyone at all types of organizations. This is one that I thought was a little more interesting. It kind of looks at the relevance of you know, the low risk versus high risk, and you can see the high risk is media and publishing companies. I think if you look down here, the somebody thought entertainment was low risk, so as of now that's going to change. And then it's actually fortunate, to a certain extent, working in the education environment is really low risk, although, you know, if any college has its database breached and has to make notification out, you know, there's still a high risk there. So I'm not quite sure how they kind of gather this information or put this together, but it's interesting to kind of see it put into that context. Reality is that within each organization and within each type of technology associated, there's risks involved at certain levels. So I think it really comes back to the point that it needs to be an appropriate you know, preparation or appropriate resources that you have to allocate to solve these problems. And from a lot of information that I read about colleges, universities, what they really want is what hackers or malicious you know, people want is a landing point or computers that they can easily control. They want to take advantage of computing resources, high bandwidth, maybe a small security team. So they kind of want to get a footprint there and control a lot of computers and use to launch attacks and use it to do other things. But you know, anybody involved in the industry, you know, involved with responsibility for security, it's really easy to get paranoid. You know, you try to do everything you possibly can, but you realize you can't do, you know, all the things that you might want to do. And then, you know, also the other thing is you're not going to have resources to do everything. I mean, it's you know, a lot of organizations now are ramping up really fast, you know, in certain areas. But you know, colleges and universities don't always necessarily have that option. So this is the latest. Well, it might be old news now. This is last Friday. So Brian Krebs is a pretty well-known security researcher. So he's actually at that top category there, kind of media and publishing, because he has his blog and he's pretty popular, but he's also a security researcher, which, you know, they face risk levels of their own. And so he, you know, started to name some of the hackers in the called Lizard Squad. And so then the Lizard Squad decided to attack him. And, you know, it's just kind of interesting in that, you know, the things that kind of go on. So what they did against him was a denial of service attack. And I checked it out, and, you know, I couldn't get to the site. So I went to the down for everyone, or just mean it was down for everybody at that time. It was back up later. So, you know, he just simply faced a DDoS attack, which it may not have necessarily caused, you know, harm, permanent harm. But if it happened to be at the same time that he's being interviewed live on CNN or some of these other things that he does, he's very prominent, you know, then it really is pretty damaging. And it was, I don't know how big the Lizard Squad is necessarily, but I think they arrested 2 people, a 22-year-old person in England and maybe a 17-year-old in Finland, or something like that. So whether it's just those 2 people or more, I'm not really sure. But you know, it's just an example of how high profile, even if it's a small group of people anywhere around the world, can really kind of raise this issue up for you know, make it very apparent. So this is kind of a quick summary of what the problem's like. It's global scale, all organizations susceptible. The entire credit card industry, I think, is threatened. That's probably one of the most serious issues, I think, to come of this. You know, the U.S. still uses mag stripes on the cards, makes them easy to duplicate. There are some changes going on with respect to the PIN and putting responsibility onto the you know, the merchants as opposed to the banks. But you know, that's a really large industry in the U.S., including debit and credit. And you know, to have that threatened, that's you know, potentially could have impact to the economy. But overall, job opportunities for the students. So this is just one quick search I did on Indeed. 25-mile radius of San Francisco, 3,566 jobs. Now, once you look through that, you know, a lot of those end up being kind of duplicated, maybe not so easy to distinguish. But you know, there definitely are quite a few job opportunities for our students. So hence that's the reason that we're getting involved with this, bringing this into the classroom. So here's, in terms of selecting computing equipment or firewall equipment, so the Magic Quadrant is a pretty good tool, and you can see Palo Alto Networks clearly one of the leaders in this space. And what's interesting to note is this graph of this quadrant hasn't really changed much the last few years. So as much as the you know, the industry is changing and the technology is changing, you know, Palo Alto has clearly been one of the leaders for the last 2 or 3 years. And here in particular is the product line that we're using. We're using the 5020, which you can see over here on the right. It works pretty well. We had a previous line, a 3000 series product in place for 3 years, and now for the last 1.5 years, we've had the 5020 in place. And it's working pretty well. You can see it's an appliance, so a lot of the vendors have switched back to the appliance model. There was an open hardware you know, kind of initiative for some period of time, but really everything is an appliance and incorporated in with licensing, where you get ongoing subscriptions to threat prevention and things of that sort. So here's just one security solution that we have to do. It's hard work, it's a lot of effort, but what it really comes down to is log analysis. And a lot of the security breaches, when they do, as John mentioned, they do the case studies and they look back, a lot of them will see that, oh yeah, there were indications in the logs of the events that took place prior to it, you know, becoming a really serious issue. So that's what you have to do as kind of a security professional is start to figure out, all right, how are we going to even approach this? You know, with the log volume that we have, 20 to 30 million at least of log entries that are captured in Firewall. So what we do is there's a threat database that's updated continuously that we subscribe to. And even then, that narrows it down a little bit. So now there's maybe around 10,000 per week that are identified as possible threats. And so we have to now make a decision. And we could even make it so that it's a little even broader than that. We could identify 20 to 50,000 a week that are threats. But what we really need to do is now make some response. So this is kind of what the heart of our talk is here, is the tools can only do so much, and now we need the human interaction and human involvement in order to really complete this process and make it worthwhile or make it functional. So if it's too light, you know, you risk having security risks if your settings are too light to function in your firewall. If things are too strict, we've impacted normal business operations. So, well, that looks bad, let's block this, let's block that, all right. And the phone starts ringing because now somebody just can't do a normal function, connect to a server or something like that. So you really have to find the right balance there. And I'm not sure how universal that's going to be across that list of industries that we saw. You know, things that we're doing in a university environment, you know, might be totally different than what somebody's doing in a financial work environment, for example. So definitely a lot of GUI tools are involved and human involvement there. So you have to find the false positives and the false negatives in addition to your positive positives and the true negatives. And, you know, it kind of becomes quite a challenge when you need to start scaling up. This is an example of the Palo Alto GUI. I realize you can't quite see the text detail there. But note across the top, what we do is essentially where we put in filters. So we can identify anything that's specific in terms of source, destination, to kind of start to narrow down. And this one I've expanded on a little bit. So this is an example of what we do with manual verification. So this is one I just happened to be looking at, and it's a category of malware. We're actually taking an action of blocking the URL. And this particular one was a source from the City College, a Wi-Fi client. The destination is this is an IP address that happened to be in Vienna. So look at the URL, which doesn't really tell you much. And the action though, block the URL. Well, that sounds okay, great. But it's nothing we take lightly at a college environment. You can't have permanent external addresses that you block. It has to be something that is a dynamic analysis, because you can go back a day later, this site's fine. So we've had a lot of conversations with our internal college community to find the right balance there. It's not categorical in the strict sense, but it's something where things are identified and it is dynamic. So we have to kind of take some action to limit that. So what I did is, in this case anyway, is just went to that particular URL, went to virus total, and put it in. You can see the detection ratio there. This is about 4 out of the 61 types of analysis tools actually validated that this was, in fact, malware. So we have a lot of different things that we can take a look at. I think what the key thing is, though, as I kind of get back to this one, is we're trying to find ways that we could really take this information and sanitize it enough so that it's not necessarily providing information that could be used against an environment like ours, but yet will still be valid in with the learning process. So we're looking at various methods of doing that. That's kind of part of the reason that Bill and I started doing this, and why we're still kind of having an ongoing discussion is what is going to be the best way to take some of this real traffic. So it's very similar to what John was talking about earlier. He's looking at case studies of looking back and what kind of organization have done better, how could they prevent something. So what we really want to do is get some of these, a million log files just in a given day, and get those into the hands of our students so they can start to do this analysis. And again, the system's going to be doing a lot of that, but they only have to validate the system. And so it's going to be kind of this continuous improvement process in terms of putting the information out there, making sure it reflects what's currently seen. So whether you realize or not, remember the concept of honeypot? You put a honeypot out there and try to capture it. Everything you put on the internet is a honeypot, whether you want it to be or not. So you have all these types of threats against you. And then also we're just thinking about things like, all right, well, if I show traffic to our website, it displays that IP address. I mean, anything that's out in your DMZ or out in the internet, somebody can scan it in no time at all and find that using Nmask or something like that, and they can look and figure out what your IP address is for your site. So, there's a lot of different ways that we can try to present this information. So that's pretty much what our goal is here. So,
yeah, Tim, when he got his, not long after he got his Palo Alto Firewall, he was talking to me about the logs that he was generating. And, it hit me that this is a really relevant learning activity. It's an important job skill for a network or system administrator to monitor logs. And it's often treated pretty lightly in curriculum. And this is a really good exercise to use in classes because it encourages critical thinking. When you look at a log, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. It takes some interpretation. There's been a lot of discussion in this room today about the CAE2Y, and if you're into that, it's part of the knowledge units for that core. And there's a lot of places in existing ICT curriculum where this can add relevance. We talk about something and just kind of skim over it, but we can add relevance to those things. And courses that come to mind to me, like the Cisco curriculum, the top group is kind of, I call them system administration things, Linux administration, Windows administration, network administration. And in these classes, you usually talk about or do some exercises where you configure logs, either transaction logs or security logs, You configure alert levels, logging destinations, log locations. I'm walking too far away. I'll stay closer. And then another group, the Security Plus, the Security class of CCNA Security, where Security Plus comes to mind. You talk about logs and you talk about using them, and depending on the curriculum you use, you might do an exercise where you go see where those logs live. But most of these exercises are usually pretty trivial. You set log settings and a destination, and you trigger some traffic, and you go look and you go, oh, that worked. My logging worked. Okay, I'm done. So with a lot of different courses, rather than propose one lesson plan, what we thought is give you some ideas to think about how you can integrate this into different courses. Some possible learning objectives. Describe the objectives for logging transactions and retaining log files. You do a course and you go set up your log files and you go, great, that worked. Why? Why am I logging this stuff? What am I ever going to do with it? And if you have some logs to work with, you can emphasize that. I think it's really useful, if some of you aren't doing it, to either use PIN statistics or get some statistics from any of your local industry. Anybody on your advisory board? One of my advisory board members just casually mentioned one day that they shunt 1 million attacks a month. And so students really don't have any perception of that. You say that in a logging class and their jaws kind of drop. 1 million attacks a month. So, either use PIN statistics or find some to give them some idea of the actual volume in those logs. And then for the security classes, you can talk about and perhaps do an analysis of logs. You've saved all these. What should you do when you look at them? And either just talk about it or have them perform a basic log analysis where they look at the entries, come up with some risk analysis. What should I care about in these 20 million log entries? If I see something that I think I care about, what should I do? Should I just run out and block traffic, or should I research it and then identify an appropriate action to address that? So some suggestions for a network administration course or system administration course. And as Tim mentioned, we're working on this idea of sanitized log files. If you can get a log file from somebody, and we're hoping we can provide a link to some on the MTIC website. Remove any identifiable information. If there are any internal IP addresses that you don't want advertised, that's pretty easy to just do a substitution for those. Remove any usernames or machine names, or do a search and replace to put bogus information in there that would be identifiable. And as I mentioned, get some statistics to give to students. Put them in small groups of 2, 3, or 4. Give them a log file and these statistics, and give them some questions. Do we really need, Tim mentioned that he has 20 to 30 million transactions. Do we really need to log all of them? How long do we need to retain these logs? And if you look at a threat log where you've decided things that you want to pull out and analyze, what tuning might you do to that log? And have them discuss that in a small group. And then go around and poll each of the groups without really making any reference. If you've ever done an exercise like this, it's really interesting to see what different groups come up with. Make notes of the answers that they came up with, and then go through and discuss those answers, highlighting things that you probably know or just some ideas that I've put up here. You need to keep the logs long enough to be able to identify specific problems. Unfortunately, when you hear about the Target attack or the Home Depot attack, they had to go back and look at all their transactions and figure out what happened and trace things back. It was interesting. Not long after the Home Depot attack, I got a new credit card in the mail from my bank. It said, we've determined, I'm sure through log files, that your credit card has been stolen from Home Depot, so here's a new one. So So in these administration classes, students need to realize, well, I'm keeping this in case someday something really bad happens and I have to go back and trace what happened, maybe reconstruct my system. Maybe, as Tim mentioned, maybe I have to report. Maybe this is HIPAA data or FERPA data, and I have to report what's been lost, so I need that detail. And then if you're generating a log that you're going to analyze, they can talk about the possibility of not logging, not analyzing things that really don't have much value. You know, there might be a bunch of insignificant warnings, and so there's no need to include those in the analysis. Maybe you need more detail, and we'll look at that in one of the logs. And you probably need some tool. As Tim mentioned, it's going to be tough to just sit down with a text file and scan thousands or tens of thousands of entries and pull out anything meaningful. And SolarWinds has one that, for class purposes, you can get a 30-day demo. I've looked briefly at OSSIM, which is an open source. That is a huge thing. That's like a virtual machine you would set up that can do some traffic analysis. But those are some tools that are available, and students should understand that that's probably what they'll use. They're not going to do like this and sit down with a text file and read through it and all 10,000 entries. But when they do, in a system administration course, you can look at some interesting things. Here I've just substituted IP addresses with 2 different servers in this log, server number 2 and number 3. Maybe I can see one of my servers is getting hit more than another. A couple of other, one thing that I noticed is the severity level on this log is all high, which might be appropriate, but what we'll talk about a little bit later is maybe there are some things coming in under high. High is probably getting stopped by my systems. And so I can look and go, oh, my systems are doing good, but what about the intermediate stuff that might be sneaking through? Another thing that we noticed when we looked at this, there's a lot of this particular log, there's a lot of things coming from China. And I had this happen with a server that I was running for classroom activities. There were lots of brute force attacks coming from China. And there was no valid reason for anyone in China to be accessing my server. So maybe I look at this log and go, okay, network administrator somewhere out at the edge, we need to block this traffic because it shouldn't even be getting to my server. So those are the kinds of things that if we give them a real log, they can start to discuss. Questions so far?
Just a comment, so we have a lot of future students in China, and so it varies. And so one of the features that a lot of the firewall vendors provide is a geo-locating type service, a geo-blocking service. And I went to the RSA security conference, and they're showing off. They said, look, you can block these students. If you ever have any customers in Bulgaria, or any customers in Estonia, or any customers in China, and I said, well, actually we do. Those are our international students. They're our preferred customers, actually. So we really want to, accelerate their access to our website. So there's no way we can implement those types of things.
And that's the critical thinking part of the whole exercise.
Correct. Yeah, it needs to be kind of selective.
Yeah. And those are the really kind of critical thinking questions that you can engage students in and take a really mundane, it's kind of that flip classroom thing too. Take a really mundane topic like, well, we configured logs, and instead of lecturing on the commands and menu phrases in class, say, well, you can read that, let's talk about why you do it. So then in security-specific classes, you can get into a little bit more detail. You can get the statistics, distribute log files. And what I'd recommend, I'll just carry this around, is this, set up a little scenario. You put them in small groups again and say, all right, you just started, because I actually had a student who did this. You just started as a network administrator, and in your daily email, you got, hey, here's the security logs for the day. Okay, thanks. What are you supposed to do with that? And have them talk about that as a small group. Okay, here's a security log, what do we do? And then again, poll each group and put up their answers. And then it's really interesting if you do some of this. Some students will look at the log and they'll pounce on something and they'll go, oh, you have to fix this. And other students will talk more about the process. And that's what you want to lead them to. How do you know what to look for? Okay, here's a bunch of stuff. What's important? And that's kind of the risk analysis part of security. How did you know it was a threat? How do you know other things that you skipped over weren't threats? What did you use to make that judgment? And then how would you organize your activities to do this in some organized fashion instead of just looking and as Tim mentioned, getting paranoid and going, oh my God, we just have to close everything off. So then this is just another example of a log. This is a network log, and another example in a security class. You might want to take a look at more specific things. You know, one thing that might jump out at you that you might want to address is you seem to have something coming internally here. I have an internal machine hacking me. So maybe I need to go out and find if there's malware on that machine. A couple of other things. What was I looking at on this one? Oh, some of the things that we're logging, they were medium to high severity and were just being alerted. Those attacks weren't actually blocked. So maybe I need to make sure that I have some control some other place because my firewall said, you let this through, but it might be a security concern. And well, there's another piece that I'm going to get to later. So these are examples, and one of the things that we had these huge log files, and you might want to think about is just taking some examples and creating log files to show some traffic that you want to illustrate. There were pages and pages of this attack from the Netherlands that I stuck in there. And you know, if I saw that one day, you might want to do a whois and see where that's coming from. I don't know if any of you have had this happen, but you know, someone hacked into one of my servers and they were using it to launch an attack, and somebody was kind enough to, rather than just block traffic, shoot me a message, hey, I'm getting attack traffic from your server. So you might want to note that if you're observing logs and let somebody know. And then again, if you need to block certain geographic locations that aren't necessary. And then in security class, you can also take it even one step farther. These logs that I've showed so far are things that have been flagged as alerts. This is known bad traffic. But again, ask why should you log valid transactions, and we talked about as a minimum to be able to reconstruct things if something bad happens. But there's also this idea of advanced evasive threats or advanced persistent threats, and they typically get by your security measures. Right? They're called evasive threats. So looking at just what your firewall has said, we've stopped this, may not be enough. You may need to have some filter to look at valid transactions. And if you do, what do you look for? Again, you can't just look at 20 or 30 million entries. So you tie in this idea of a risk analysis. Look at high-value targets. You mentioned that in an academic environment, his main charge is to protect student-identifiable information. There's a federal law that says you have to protect that. So you might want to look at that log and look for unusual things that are happening in that student database. You know, there was a massive download to Russia at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was probably not a valid transaction, even though it got through the firewall. You you want to look, one of the things, this is one way back thousands of years ago when I was a system admin, root login that I caught. I was looking at logs and someone had logged in with my system administrator credentials at a time when I wasn't there. So no firewall caught that or anything. It was valid traffic, but it was a hack. So those are the kinds of things that you want to look for in valid traffic. And then if you do find something that looks suspicious, you have to use those skills, not panic, research it, find out if it was legitimate, what you can do to stop it without interfering with the day-to-day activities of the organization. So hopefully those are some things, some ideas that you can use in your curriculum anywhere when you talk about log files to kind of give it some relevance, give students a chance to use some critical thinking about why they're doing what they're doing, and appreciate the volume that's involved there. Okay. Huh? Oh, yeah. Okay. So Tim's got another file here.
Yeah, sorry. We bounced things around a little bit with our files, but this is one that fits well too with what John was mentioning in his presentation. And so, we have some that are so well publicized that you just naturally take action on. So there was shell shock, for example, was a problem this year, and so it was highly publicized, and it was just kind of interesting to see how that whole how the industry reacts to that. So there's we were received dynamically. We received an update to the firewall. We applied it. Also, our system administrators applied the patch to the various Linux systems and things like that they're managing. So we had a lot of these attempts that we blocked. But one of the things you do is you start to research it and start to have the students look at, all right, what was the actual issue? What was the actual vulnerability? And then what does the kind of industry come up with in terms of response? And what you can see with shell shock, again, this is really highly publicized. And you notice I just kind of mentioned here towards the last one, so severity is critical, gets an ID number, etc. And the very last words are that this remote code execution, a successful attack could lead to a code execution that uses privileges of the user. So that isn't nearly severe as Bill mentioned about as root. And so again, this is highly publicized, this thing. It made it sound really bad. And then also the thing is, because it was so well publicized, a lot of fixes came out that it didn't even work. And so this is a CVE that overwrote a previous one. It said, this has been assigned to cover the vulnerability that is still present after the incorrect fix. So you have the whole industry rushing around doing incorrect fixes for things that aren't really serious problems in a highly publicized environment where if you're on an IT team, they expect you to work all night, on this kind of stuff. So, so again, there's false positives that you catch. This is like an easy positive, something relatively easy to solve. There's others that you miss completely because you're busy doing these kinds of things. So, so something like this, I think, is really important to kind of pull all these pieces together. So did you have more slides?
That's okay.
I think you had. Sometimes up to
yeah.
That was your last slide.
Yeah, we can. That was kind of what I was talking about why they analyze transactions. Yeah, we've gone through that.
Yeah, logins and unusual activity, and so. So in this case, it was, when you do hear about these things that they're becoming more and more publicized. So it's really useful, I think, for our students to kind of figure out how to react to these types of things. So the last thing we have here, and so I'd like to introduce Anton from Palo Alto. So So he's here to kind of help, answer any questions you might have specifically about the Palo Alto products, about what they can do. And then also, he's not directly responsible for the Palo Networks Academy, but what we would like to do is kind of be able to gather information. We want to work with the Palo Alto Academy to try to get more and more of this realistic data out into the environment. So imagine a somewhat sanitized, very realistic log file with 1 million entries that we can distribute out to educators to use in either lesson plan or within your actual course curriculum. So, Anton, you guys have any questions, or you want to say anything? Yeah.
I just was going to ask, do you have any of those sanitized log files that are available?
We will soon. I guess we're going to see what you would like, what you expect to see in them. Length of size, how big the log files need to be. We can sanitize them a bit. We're just going to talk amongst our team to find the best way to do that. So I wrote my email up here. It's certainly invisible ink. You can't see it, but we'll have I think we have a sign-up sheet here. I think that's one thing that we'd like to be able to do is work towards that. Another question? Yes.
So, some of the things that World Firewall was that
Anton? Come on, we have a mic there. So I'll repeat the question. So, because we have people online or we're recording this. So the question is, what essentially advantages of the Palo Alto Networks Firewall product versus others in industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So our core message, our core differentiator is identifying applications and the way we identify applications, layers 1 through 7. So we identify applications, as soon as it hits the firewall by an app ID signature. We don't look at what port it's going over. We don't look at what protocol it's using, any evasive tactic, even SSL encrypted traffic. We can look at and identify. That's one of our big differentiators, the way we identify applications. Secondly, the way we identify users. From a traditional Cisco approach, like a Cisco PIX or a Cisco ASA, what they're doing out of the box is they're looking at users by IP address, right? With our approach, we have a technology called User ID, where we sync into an Active Directory database and identify students, faculty, staff, administrators by username. So Tim Ryan in IT contacted this command and control traffic from this device.
Yeah. So that's specifically a field I removed before I gave the log file to Bill. I took out the internal ID information, but it is extremely useful. And we noticed that there, some departments request a generic account, and that they share amongst the team. So we'll see certain types of malicious traffic occurs on the generic account versus on an individual account. So we can kind of, observe in that regard. So generic accounts aren't necessarily a good idea.
And the reason why Palo Alto Networks is being so adopted so rapidly in the space, especially in higher education institutes, is because we were literally able to build the firewall from the ground up, right? Cisco ASA, they started with the PIX technology, port-based legacy architecture, where traffic has to be scanned, in a silo approach. With Palo Alto Networks, since we were able to be the first ones in the next generation firewall space, we're able to adopt an architecture where everything gets scanned once, which gives you high performance, instead of turning on this module on the ASA for web filtering, for threat detection, for SSL decryption. Every time you turn on one of those modules in our competitors, performance takes a hit. So we size by 2 real-world numbers, everything turned on, you get this number, application ID, you get the top number. No matter what you do, you get the bottom, no asterisks, no degradation, no caveats there. And another thing that differentiates us, one of the big things from a value perspective, is what Tim showed you, the log correlation, right? Being able to translate that information, seeing what application was on my network, what users are on my network, what threats are on my network, and be able to set policies proactively to better improve your security posture overall. I hope that helps. Okay. No, 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 no.
So I'll repeat the question. Is do you know what market share that Palo Alto Networks has in the firewall space with respect to Cisco? Right. So are you going to?
Yeah, I don't think I have those exact numbers. Off the top of my head, I don't think Palo Alto Networks has 10% yet of the market share. I know Cisco probably is in the 30 to 40% of the market share. Don't quote me on that. I don't know hard numbers. I'm not a.
But it would reference back to the Magic Quadrant from Gartner. I mean, they do a lot of research on that. That's really widely read. And like I said, it hasn't moved much for the last few years. So it's a dynamic space, but if you define it as next generation firewall, which we also kind of use the term application aware, but NGFW is an acronym that's pretty widely used out there. And you'll see again the appliance model. I think is great. You know, really low latency. Scales up to certain types of bandwidth. In fact, we just talked about we've had a gigabit network across all the city here for years. We're just now looking at some 10 gig links in our internet backhaul. We're going to 10 gig, even though we only use about 50–60% of it. We have the opportunity to go to 10 gig, so we can actually aggregate multiple 1 gig links into essentially 2 gig links, as opposed to upgrading everything to 10 gig. So you know, it was easy when everything's a giggy, but now selectively which ones do you make 10 gig, and it's more of a challenge. But the fact that we have that flexibility, we can aggregate folks together in this space.
And just to piggyback on that, I think one of the main benefits of the Palo Alto Networks Academy is to give the future hands-on experience, but not just Palo Alto Networks, but just a different approach of network security, right? The traditional approach, like you're talking about at Cisco ASA, where they're making policies based on ports, based on IP addresses. That's a very ineffective way to enforce policies. As you know, with the Home Depot, the Sony breaches, JP Morgan, all those big major security hacks, it's all about taking the next step and being proactive with your security posture.
What is the price difference between Cisco ASA and Palo Alto?
I don't know. It depends. It depends. The way we license our product with subscription, support, and hardware is, I think, different than the way they do it. I know they license with different modules and different user counts and all those kind of levels. I can't speak to that.
But I will say that was a big change in the industry by the product. I mean, to get a subscription is where you really take advantage of the dynamic nature of the threat prevention. Without that, you'd be setting it up and then, maybe you'd tune it every once in a while, but you wouldn't at all be keeping up to date with everything that's going on. So you really do pay a lot for that threat prevention service, and whatever Palo Alto has kind of in their research labs to kind of come up with that. That's a lot of what you're paying for, and definitely well spent.
Should we be having a discussion about whether or not
Yeah, in fact, I'll pull up the one that John made reference to. That's actually public information. And sure, just get this one. Here's the line. So the question is, should we be developing like a honeypot just for colleges that people can then, students can really get an idea to see the threats that are prevalent and that are out there. So this one, we'd have to build on this. This one's pretty good. They essentially put up these honeypots around the world, and for a while there, I thought, this is just some Flash script that somebody wrote. But I think it is pretty real. Where's the target? And don't see too many coming out from the U.S. going anywhere else. And this does change. I was looking at this last week, and it was much more around a honeypot in St. Louis for whatever reason. And so, now it looks a bit more spread across the U.S. But it's actually doing real-time data up at the top. They track the targets. By far, we have up to 170 attacks against the U.S. Russia's in second place with only 13. But it's yeah, we're number one. It gives you the attack types down here. So that was really interesting, and I guess one of the reasons that we shifted to this model is purely based on port 80 type traffic. That we said, all right, well, a lot of things are going to be look up port 80, and sure enough, so a lot of these the highest type of threat, it's right now it's against either port 80 or port 23 for telnet. Port 8080 is there as well. So, if you read down here too, you'll see the organization, actually the source of these, the location, target, IP, service type, that kind of thing. So this is map.ipvikings.com. So I don't think we could do this good of a job in real time, but I think we could definitely get some statistics that would be useful.
Well, I'm thinking if it's a synthetic network, then we don't have to do as much sanitizing.
Right. Yeah, but a lot of what we see is inbound. It's kind of a handshake. It'll be maybe outbound connection initiated, some type of inbound threat. So you do kind of need a large internal organization traffic. Otherwise, you're just looking at purely like scans. You're just getting scanned all day and maybe try some common exploits against whatever operating system that you have. So I think it'd be much more realistic. Essentially, like a classic example is the huge Wi-Fi network, where essentially there's no antivirus on the devices. We don't use any network access control to force people to upgrade and quarantine them and all of that. I don't think we'd be successful doing that. So we have at any given time, up to 2,000 active devices on the Wi-Fi network, so you're seeing that interaction. And I think that's probably going to be the problem. Is that automatic light? That's automatic? Thank you. So, any other questions? So again, we have information here about the, I think there's one more question. One more question? Go ahead.
No. So what we do is we offer kind of subsidized fees if you want to purchase your own lab unit, or a virtual appliance that you can run on a VM. But there's different ways we license those out as well. But I know they are subsidized just to help out with the cost. Yes, there is a certification process where I'm not too sure what the license is called, but I know the instructors are going to have to go through that training. And, first step is. Oh, I don't know how. I can get that information. And then the curriculum, you could use ours or you can customize it on your own to tailor it how you want to deliver it to your students.
I think it's a lot of VMs though, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of VMs, so the students are definitely going to get familiar with the GUI. They're definitely going to learn how to set up the rules. They're definitely going to learn how to apply the policies. But unless you get real traffic going through it, that would be kind of like the added dimension I think that we could do to it. Could be varying levels of traffic through it.
I just completed the Firewall training. I found it very good.
Oh, great. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Question here?
Just a comment. I think the traditional education for whole thing is great, but I think it was also the opportunity to incorporate several students who are on a slightly different class. Because they are the ones who can take the input from the security and the management students and say, okay, what are you guys looking for? Maybe I can write this. To kind of go look at it.
Another great application of it.
Okay, so that concludes the talk. Thank you, everyone.
It's just the time that I stopped the interviewing